I'm Jeff Lohman.
I'm Mandy Bowman.
And I'm Craig Thomas. And this is Life Unscripted. When I was a child, my mother made me eat every single day. I know, made me, sometimes 3 times a day. So I decided when I was old enough to make decisions on my own, I was done with meals.
No more meals for you?
Nope. That's okay. Oh, there were some obligation meals, like special days.
Like Christmas?
Yeah. Easter,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Thanksgiving. Okay, I would eat then, but no more. How do you think that worked out? Now, why do we Christians see church that way for our kids when man does not live by bread alone, but that which the word that we have to feed on the word? And where do now, if you have a home where the word is fed every single day, I understand perhaps giving your child the decision to go to church or not. That's what we're talking about today. Should you force your child to go to church? Now, we have differing opinions on the panel today, and surprisingly, one of them is a pastor.
Surprisingly.
Surprisingly.
Yes, both surprising that he's a pastor.
Right, no kidding.
So I will tell you really, really quick, growing up, I think Mandy and I were very, very similar in the fact that growing up we were forced to go to church every time the doors were open, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. And we've had this conversation a little bit in the past that, you know, Mandy's from that same background. And yet when we had kids, my wife and I began to have discussions about it, and we did not force our kids to go to church all the time. And at least for me, the key term there is the word force is, I think force leads to rebellion. And I think about my relationship with God. God has never forced anything on me. He's there, he's present, he wants to bring me in and lure me in. But forcing is the key term there for me, and I have difficulty with that from my background. And so we differ on the opinion of this. But
I'm right, but
see,
you know.
Mandy has no kids.
That's true.
Mandy has no children, so it's easy to say this is what I'm going to do.
But
when you don't have kids. But
she's a pastor's kid.
she is a pastor's kid. She
Yeah.
is.
How did your dad, the pastor, deal with that?
Well, it was required that we be at church. I was there every Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, but I don't think my dad being a pastor really was the deciding factor in that regard, though, because church was so important to my parents even before my dad became a minister, that it was a very regular thing. It's like, no, we're going to have our kids in the house of the Lord when we have that opportunity and that privilege and that wonderful chance to be there. So that was definitely part of our lives. Whether my dad's a pastor or not, that would have been important.
So let me ask you both, did you see instances of that, Jeff, where people who were kids who were forced to church rebelled and it gave them a bad taste for
Absolutely.
church?
Absolutely. I would say that's when, at least personally for me, and it's only my opinion, that's when what I would say legalism starts seeping in. It's when the dogmatic thoughts start seeping in, when you start forcing kids to do things. You've got to create the environment for your kid to help them understand the importance of, and let them, because I'll tell you this, eventually your kids are going to have to make their own decision about Jesus. And a lot of times kids ride on the coattails of mom and dad for so long, and then they get really confused at 18, 19, 20, that they think to themselves, now, wait a minute, is this really real? Is it really personal? And so I think for our own lives, my family, is that we had to kind of set the pace, help our kids see the importance of church, but also helping them balance and understand, okay, if I don't choose to do that, then you know, there may be repercussions for that. But help them understand that eventually, Spencer, Drew, you're going to have to make the decision, is church going to be a priority? And so we tried, at least, parenting's tough, and navigating this topic is really hard. but we at least try to provide some balance to help them navigate their own spiritual journey. So they were ready.
At what age did you no longer force them?
I would say it was early adolescence, and we probably at 12 and 13, 14, and it really started with our oldest son, who was playing a travel sport. And any parent that can relate to that understands there's a lot of being away.
But that was a decision. You let your child choose a sport over church.
No, I didn't let him choose the sport over church. I allowed him to participate in the sport if it conflicted at times with Sunday service. It wasn't ongoing every single Sunday. Our son said, I'm not going to church. It wasn't like that. It was, during the season, it happened to be travel basketball. So there would be tournaments out of town or perhaps even out of state occasionally. And he'd like to participate. And we talked to him about that. And we helped him understand we understand we're going to allow you to do this. But when you're in Wilmington, even during a tournament weekend, we do expect you to be in church on Sunday morning. So it wasn't like all the time. We allowed a choice occasionally for him to choose to do something like that versus being in church. And might I say that same son is now a pastor. And so I think it was a good decision on our part. But again, it's a parenting thing, and it has to be a personal decision for each and every.
But I dare say we've seen the other part happen too, where kids who weren't forced, we use that word, to church, well, they just never went, and it didn't turn out so well. So I'm not sure how that equals out. Did you see peers that went away from the church because they were forced to go?
I personally didn't see any friends of mine who rebelled and walked away from the church forever because they were forced to go. And I was forced to go. And for me, there was never even a thought of rebellion at some point later. It was just such a natural thing for me because my parents, it was a training thing for them. They made sure I was at church. It was a part of our life. It was part of our habit. We were serving, we were participating, worshiping God, studying His Word, doing all the things. And so when I got older, there was never a question in my mind of, is church still important for me to go? Yeah, it is. So I never walked away from the church at that point. But I did, personally, I saw a whole lot of kids who weren't forced to go when they were young. And church just really wasn't that big of a priority. They'd come, every now and then.
Special occasions.
Special occasions. The Creasters, as we would call them, the Christmas and Easter type people, right? But church was not a priority to them, so it never became a priority for their kids. And that made it much more difficult for those particular kids to walk with the Lord because they didn't have any of that training. And just church is part of that training. It's not obviously all of it.
Well, here's the question then I would probably have to ask you, Mandy, is were you involved in extracurricular activities that would have created time conflict with church? Because that's a big key. If you weren't involved in those in the first place, it's no biggie. I mean, our kids would have done the same thing. Mm-hmm. They'd have been in church. But because, my oldest was involved in sports, my youngest was involved in theater and performing and those types of things, that is a key. In this day and age, I don't know of many parents who are not raising kids that are not just busy doing extracurricular
and that
things.
Does make it very difficult for sure. For my family, we were homeschooled or in Christian school for a vast majority of our schooling. So the Christian school was really good about not interfering with church stuff, right?
Sure. With all that, church was still important to you and your family. It was.
And there were some points where, as we were kids, we wanted to get into something, and I was like, you know what? This is going to require, you to be out of church every single Wednesday. And you know what? That's just not worth it to us. I'd rather you'd be in church learning more about God and fellowshipping with other believers than doing this thing that's going to take you out of that fellowship.
Well, let me say something, because I know we're running out of time. And I think this is important because this affected me personally when I was in school. When I was in junior high school, I participated in sports, and my family, my dad was, you're in church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, revival, you name it, the doors are open, you're there. Mm-hmm. And I would participate in sports and always, inevitably, would have to go to the coach on a Wednesday and say, Coach, I'm sorry, I've got to leave at 5 or I've got to leave at 5:30 because my family goes to church on Sunday. That is embarrassing for a kid that's in adolescence and is going through that hard time anyway with his peer group. that may have had a big effect on me making that decision as we got older and started raising our own kids, because it almost turned me off toward the church, to be honest. So
I can understand that. It is such a personal family choice, parent choice. My mother, I will use the word strongly, encouraged me to go to church.
that's a good term.
Every time the doors were open. And there were those times when I got older, but I find myself needing church. Needing church today. I need that accountability that church provides. I need that fellowship, and the strengthening of the Word, and remembering, oh yeah, that's for me, and seeing it different every single Sunday. And when it comes to children, my own children, I thought it was important to follow Proverbs, as you used the word training earlier, to train up the child in the way they should go.
Yep.
Now,
Proverbs 22:6. I had it pulled up right here, ready
that's
to
good.
go. You beat me to it.
2 against 1. But I'll at the expense of messing with the word, please forgive me, I'll add a couple words to that. Train up a child in the way they should go to church, and that will not depart from them. I believe that's true in this case too. Only thing we can say is pray about it.
Yeah.
And what's best for your children, you know your children better than we or anyone, and how they deal with it. But find a good church as a family. Find it. We have wonderful churches in the area, including North Point, huh?
And let me say this too: both of our kids are heavily involved in church. You know, one is now 29, pastoring. The other's 23, very involved in church. So you know that's important that they are there and they've navigated that path themselves. So that's what they've chosen to do.
And that's great. That's great. But I for one, I'm thankful my parents made that a priority no matter what. And I see the benefit. And not to say your way is like wrong. And no, it's just there's definitely, even among believers in a Christian music station, and there's some difference of opinion, and that's okay. But I think it like Craig said, comes down to, you know, pray about it. Pray about it and
well,
do what's
we
best for your
just
family.
really hope that one day Mandy has a child, and that child's playing soccer every other weekend in Wilmington. So we'll see what happens.
Not on a Sunday morning.
Come back, part two.
But what do you think? We would love to hear what you think about this.
Yeah,
topic.
let us know in the comments. We'd be glad to hear it. And be sure to like and subscribe. And thanks for listening to Life Unscripted.
You're wrong.